Thanks for tuning in to Written on the Edge, Season 7, Episode 43. I'm Vance Bastion here with my co-host, S.A. Baz Collins.
Hello.
We're really glad you're here with us. Our guest today is Garrett Hutson, and he's going to share a couple of his new books and a work in progress, and one that I'm excited about that got derailed. And Michael Williams is going to join us to review Hocus Pocus 2. And then Baz and I'll share what's won our week. So let's get rolling. Garrett Hutson writes upmarket mysteries and historical spy fiction driven by flawed characters who are moving and unforgettable. He writes about ordinary people in different times and places who struggle with faith, family dysfunction, and all of the moral gray areas of life. It's realistic fiction, so Garrett's work is always diverse and LGBT-inclusive. Garrett, welcome back to the show.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
We're glad you made it.
Yeah, me too.
So for folks who didn't hear your first interview, just give us a real quick how you became an author. Like, where did that fire start?
Gosh, it goes way back. Quite literally since before I could remember. So my late grandmother, in perfect grandparent style, telling the same story over and over again, she never tired of telling me how when I was really little, I would entertain all my older cousins with these really elaborate tales. And I would act them out and do the motions and the voices and the whole bit. And, how they didn't know I was gay is beyond me. I don't know. They had no clue.
Their ability to deny is amazing.
The only thing I can think is it was the 70s. So,
right.
I was sensitive. I was creative, but, anyway. But I think I was in the 4th grade the first time we had an author come to school and actually do a talk to us. And I really wish I could remember who it was. It was some, old lady, which means she was probably like 50, but she came and talked to us about her process and how she did drafts, and she held up her pages with the, red marks on them and all that kind of stuff. And that was the first time I really knew that an author was a thing, like that you could be. And I thought, wow. And I went home that night and I told my mom and dad, that's what I want to be when I grow up. It never changed, and it took a long time, but here I am.
Very awesome. All right, so you've got a couple of books we need to talk about today.
Yeah.
Let's start with Each Hidden Passage, Book 2 in the Tales of the Bohemian Resistance.
Yeah. So I love this series. This is the sequel to Grey Paris, which is probably my personal favorite out of all the books I've written. It's a story about an American musician in France named Oliver Carmichael. This is at the very beginning of World War II when the Germans come marching in. The U.S. was still neutral, so he was safe there, but of course, he has this very eclectic group of friends, writers, artists, musicians, dancers, actors, the whole bit. The kind of people that I really like I love weirdos who know they're weirdos and don't care. And right. So this group of people was really fun for me to write about and explore. And I just had a lot of fun playing around with that. This is also the kind of people that Nazis hate the most, people who will just do what they want and march to their own drummer. Mm-hmm. And so there was a potential for a lot of conflict there. And so I had them getting into the resistance early, all the danger that brought. And Oliver was kind of forced into the role of being their liaison with the American embassy. And so that was one of my favorite stories. And when I was done with that, I wanted to write a sequel. It took me a little while, but Each Hidden Passage is the second book in the series. They are no longer in Paris. They are now in Lyon, which is in the unoccupied southern part of France. So still no Gestapo. So it was safe for Oliver. But it was still ruled by this kind of extreme right-wing, sort of fascist Vichy regime. They were collaborationist and still not a very free place to live. So Oliver now owns his own cabaret, sort of, Rick's Cafe Americaine type, right. a little bit of Casablanca pastiche there. Nice. A gathering place for, again, these eclectic bohemian kind of people, and they distribute underground newspapers there. Oliver also, just when he thinks his life has gotten back to normal, he's approached by this government bureaucrat, kind of high-level bureaucrat, who just happens to be married to a woman he used to have an affair with. So there's a little bit of drama there as well. And he comes and he tells Oliver, you're going to meet with this Free French agent that was just airdropped in, and you're going to tell me what he says. And so he kind of forces Oliver into this role of spy, essentially, kind of liaising between a government official and the Free French. And kind of snowballs from there. Oliver gets involved in smuggling guns from Spain to the resistance, and there's just a lot of danger. It was a fun story. I loved it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Anything you want people to know? Like if I were standing in a bookstore and I was turned to you and say, what's the one thing about this that really made you happy?
This is probably my most queer series, and this is even more queer than Grey Paris.
Nice.
So Oliver and most of his friends are very, I should say, semi-open in the fact that they're mostly bi. There's some gays and lesbians as well, but they're mostly bi. Only the villains are straight, in this story, which I think
No
is fun.
subtext there. No subtext whatsoever.
None. And I got to explore that a lot with Oliver too. And by the end of the story, his idea of himself and what he is and his future has completely changed from what it was in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Very
Loved it.
nice.
Yeah.
All right. So hopping to your Death in Shanghai series.
Yeah.
Fourth book on the
Fourth
way.
book. It is on the way. It has taken a little bit longer than I wanted. But as it often happens. This is actually my most popular series. It's the one that I most often have fans ask me, when's the next one coming out? Soon, I promise.
Yeah. Well, it's the one that I knew about you before I first talked to you.
Oh, really? Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Yeah.
I'm a fan of the spy genre, so.
Excellent. Yeah. And this is a kind of a combination of spy and murder mystery at the same time. So the main character is Douglas Bainbridge. He's a U.S. Naval Intelligence officer in Shanghai. He's kind of there immersed in Chinese culture in Shanghai. But while he's there, he keeps coming across these murders that he has to solve. In the first book, it's one of his childhood friends who's murdered, and the police won't take it seriously, so he does. And the nice thing about Shanghai is there's a danger with these amateur detectives that you don't want to have the Jessica Fletcher effect, where they just keep stumbling across these bodies unrealistically. But Shanghai was a really interesting place. It was it had a very high crime scene, or crime rate, I should say, and it was very corrupt with a lot of gangs and things like that. So it's pretty easy to get these situations where Doug has to solve a crime, at least for now. I think there's going to be a fifth book. At least I have an idea for a fifth book, and who knows beyond that.
Okay.
But the fourth book is called The Pink Lotus. And in this, one of Doug's good friends has been accused of murder and arrested and charged. And, once the police have a suspect, they kind of stop their investigation. They have who they want. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of up to Doug and some of his other friends to prove that Stewart is innocent and find out who really killed him. And there's a bitchy drag queen.
You mentioned that. I want to hear more about this.
Or female impersonator is
right.
the term that they used, because this is the 1930s. So they would not have called them drag queens yet. And this was one of those things I did actually have to look up. The word drag queen was first appeared in print in 1941. I was like, oh, so close, so close. This story's set in 1938, so I had to use.
Well, they could have set the fashion. I mean, Could have been a local term, colloquial term,
I have never quite been brave enough to do that, to make mine the person who coined a phrase, but
you're God, you're allowed. He says, and pushing him out the door.
Yeah. So one of the things about this that's fun is Doug identifies as straight. He believes himself to be straight, but he's an unreliable narrator. And so he has these friends who are not necessarily straight, and he has to learn not to judge them for that, because, for obvious reasons that are laid out in the books. But then in this book, he comes across Pan Yin Tao, who is a Chinese female impersonator who is connected with the murder in ways that I won't reveal. And she performs at a club that is called the Pink Lotus, which is where we get the title of the book. And he is forced into working with her, and with obvious mayhem.
Mayhem ensues.
Yes.
All right. So in order to avoid spoilers that I want to hear, let's give your announcement about the first three books.
Okay, sure. The first book in the series is called The Jade Dragon. Also named after a nightclub. There's a little bit of a theme here. One of Doug's friends is murdered while during intermission for a show at a club called the Jade Dragon. And like I said, the police believe it was just a murder or a robbery. They don't
murder.
really. Yeah.
It's Thursday.
And so Doug has to investigate. And there was a bit of a question of whether it was the communists, whether it was this criminal gang called the Axe Gang. Were they cooperating? Was somebody framing one or both of them? And so Doug has to kind of figure that out. And in the interim, one of his Chinese friends gets accused of murdering a Japanese secret agent, and he has to try to clear her name as well. And then the third book in the series, No Accidental Death. At this point, Doug is back working on a ship, but still based out of Shanghai. And one of the members of his crew is murdered during the Japanese invasion of the city. So he's in a war zone. He has been shot in the war zone. It looks like he was just, in the wrong place at the wrong time. But the autopsy reveals that he was actually killed by an American gun. Dun, dun, dun. So Doug has to try to figure out who actually killed him. And he has a little bit of an official role in this. He's assigned by the Navy to find out, was it one of our own? And I won't reveal whether it was or not.
Right. And that's actually one we covered in your last interview if people want to go listen to it.
Yes.
So the first three books are, you have another announcement to make.
Yes, they are all three out on audio now. That was a process that took me a little while, but I found a great narrator and they turned out really well. I am so happy with how they turned out. James Wolven is the name of my narrator, and I highly recommend him. He does a fantastic job with a very large cast of characters with very different voices, and he makes them come to life. It's really turned out well. So for all you audiobook listeners out there, I recommend this.
Perfect. Now, your novella that became a novel that derailed, and you had to go send it to an editor for some doctoring. The history behind this is what I want to talk about, actually. Okay. I'm not asking you to spoil the novel, but the colony, this sort of utopian colony.
Yeah.
One, where did you hear about it? But two, what drew you to writing in it?
So I want to say it was probably 15 or more years ago. I read a short little segment in a history book. I read a lot of history books. I know that's kind of nerdy, but I read a lot of history books. And I read this short little snippet about the Marymount colony, which was very, very un-Puritan in Puritan New England. And I found a little bit more about this. It was the Marymount colony. Mary is in Let Us Make Merry, and Mount is in mountain, Marymount. And it was founded by this eccentric person named Thomas Morton. He was a lawyer from southwestern England. And as we've established, I like eccentric people. So I was kind of drawn to that to the beginning. And this was a very merry place on purpose. It was named aptly. He had a big maypole. They had a lot of drunken revels. I thought, well, that's right up my alley. And then I found some hints that there was a lot of potential same-sex male-male relationships going on there. In his memoirs a decade later, Thomas Morton referred to the boys of his settlement as his Ganymedes.
Interesting.
Now, if anybody knows anything about Greek mythology, Ganymede was the most handsome youth in all of ancient Greece. He was just beautiful. And Zeus looked down from Mount Olympus and fell madly in love with him. And so Zeus turned himself into an eagle, as you do, and swooped down and snatched Ganymede up and carried him back to Mount Olympus, where Ganymede became his favorite lover. Zeus had a lot of lovers, mortals, goddesses, the whole bit, but Ganymede was his favorite. And at that time in the 1630s, when Thomas Morton was writing his memoir, any educated person in England knew Greek mythology. And so when he referred to these boys as his Ganymedes, there was no secret what he was talking about. It would have been very obvious to them, even if it's not so obvious to a lot of educated folk today. And so you read that and you're like, And then on top of that, William Bradford, who was the governor of the Plymouth plantation, in his diaries, he wrote some very nasty things about Thomas Morton and the Marymount colonies. They were, he listed out a whole slew of vices, drunkenness, dancing, fornication, and then he also included and worse practices. Well, to the Puritans, what's worse than dancing and fornication? Could it be the sin that must not be named? And here he is literally not naming it. So it's pretty clear that there was a lot of same-sex activity happening here. More overtly, he was very into cooperation with the local natives. There was a relationship of mutual respect and trade. Boys from his colony married native women. As we've established, they probably also married each other. And I just thought, this would be a fantastic place to set a story. And so I came up with some characters and I wrote a story. I think this was probably 2008, the first time. So 14 years ago.
Oh, wow.
It was awful.
Oh.
It was really, really awful. I read through it a few years ago now, and it was viscerally painful to read through this, how awful it was. And this was one of those things that, if anyone else is writers, they know you start things sometimes, it goes off the rails, you set it aside, you never really think about it again. This was one of those things that it never really left my mind. It kept jabbing at me, I need to finish this. And I would get it out and tinker with it from time to time and just was never happy with it. And in frustration, put it back in the drawer. And then this spring, I thought, you know what? I'm just going to rewrite it from scratch. Take the basic structure, the same characters, but just rewrite it from scratch. And that worked pretty well. It's tons better, night and day better. And yet still there's something that's just not clicking about it. And I don't know why. And it's really aggravating because I really want to tell the story. So in frustration, I sent it off to an editor a few weeks back, and it was basically just help. Please help.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, please let me know when that's out.
Will do.
Or at least up for pre-orders, because it sounds like, if nothing else, sounds like an amazing setting.
Yeah.
But knowing your work, I know it's probably an amazing cast of characters too. So.
Oh, thank you.
All right. So coming up, Pink Lotus will be out soon. Do you have anything else coming up we should be aware of?
Yeah, so we're actually only about a week away from NaNoWriMo, which for those who don't know, that's National Novel Writing Month, which takes place in November every year. That's an annual challenge to write 50,000 words of fiction in 30 days, which is a lot. It's very tough. I've done this now since 2012. And I've always managed to get to 50,000. A few years it was by the skin of my teeth, but I've always managed to do it. And I do love it. It's crazy and it's difficult, and I can produce some really good work that way, ironically. A lot of my books have started as NaNoWriMo projects.
Nice.
So I am, as of right now, this is subject to change in the next week, but as of right now, I am planning to do a 5th Shanghai book. So,
very nice.
You heard it first. You heard it here first. Breaking news.
So I know the Nano community often has like smaller communities / groups, many of them geographically based, but some of them just online. Are you in any of those?
I am not in any of the online ones. I have done events here locally, which I believe they're going to allow again this year. The last couple of years, they didn't allow in-person events because of the pandemic and everything. So I am actually eager to get back out with other writers and have these write-ins at, some little restaurant or bar around nearby.
Nice. Yeah. Our library locally actually sets aside their meeting rooms for the Nano groups.
Excellent.
Oh, lovely.
So you can, and it's like, what is it? Like one night, they always pick one night a week, and it's like always a Wednesday night, and then it's like all Saturday afternoon.
Oh, cool.
And those rooms are just set aside for that purpose.
Very good.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. All right.
I have a couple of in-person appearances coming up.
I was about to ask.
Yeah. So on Tuesday, November 1st, I'm going to be speaking at the Muncie Pride Network, which is in Muncie, Indiana. This will be at 6:30 p.m. Eastern at the Guardian Brewing Company. So anybody in the central Indiana area, come see us. I'm going to be talking about issues faced by queer authors who write queer characters, some of the issues that creates, and how I invest in historical authenticity with my books.
Very cool.
Then on Saturday, November 26th, I'm going to be at the Lou Wallace Hoosier Author Fair in Crawfordsville, Indiana. This is a growing author fair. Like when I first started doing this several years ago, it was about 6 or 7 authors, and they're up to about 25 or so authors now. This is the Saturday after Thanksgiving. It's 5 to 8 p.m. and it's on the square in downtown Crawfordsville. And like I said, it's about 20 to 25 Indiana authors who are there to talk with readers in person, sign books, and it's a fun event. Come out and see us.
Very cool. Do you keep this all up to date on one of the social sites where people can follow you and get more information?
I will. I am on Facebook and I'm on Twitter. I'm not super active on either, but I will post when I have events like this. I'll post that on social media so that people can follow. Really, the best place to keep in touch with me is to sign up for my newsletter, which I do have a link on my website, on the homepage of my website, and also various other pages in the website as well. You can click to sign up for my newsletter. I will keep you updated monthly and sometimes more often than that on what I'm working on. I give book reviews and information about appearances like this.
Perfect. Any final words of wisdom?
Oh gosh, words of wisdom. I'm not very wise. Be you. You know, because everybody else is taken. I can't take credit for that. That's Oscar Wilde.
I was gonna say.
But be you. I mean, for real. And if you're weird, be weird.
And I have a T-shirt for Rope Podcast, just throwing a shameless plug here, that you can buy that says actually that. Be you.
Excellent. Yes. But well, like I said, I like weirdos, so just be weirdo. Be a weirdo.
Nice.
If you have a freak flag, let it fly.
I have another T-shirt that says stay queered, and it's QWEIRD.
Excellent.
All right, we'd like to extend a huge thank you to Garrett Hutson for being with us. Garrett, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Nice to be here.
All right, now on to our review. Us review Hocus Pocus 2. Not that it's scary in any way, but it touches on so many gay happy hearts that we had to. Child,
this was the gayest damn Disney thing I think I have watched. Move over, Love Victor. There are drag queens in town.
So for those of you who didn't see the first one decades ago, 1, where have you been? 2, 3 icons playing witches, resurrected from Salem lore, just camping it up. I mean, really, they are the campiest witches on the planet.
Yeah.
And so decades later, we get Hocus Pocus 2. Another virgin has lit a candle. The witches are back in their full campish glory, complete with song.
I love that they burst out of the ground singing.
Yeah, they did.
Like, why not? Why not?
Can't get more gay than that.
I feel like Bette Midler was like, okay, there's a song minimum for me to do this. Like, we have to do a certain number of musical numbers,
right? Every 20 minutes. Quantity.
Yeah. Like,
but the thing about since we're on the music, the thing about the music that was different this time is it was parodying songs. The original, they actually pretty much sang the regular songs. They just sort of backed it up with the chanting. Mm-hmm. But in this one, instead of the bitch is back, it was the witch is back. I mean, they actually parodied the songs this time, which I thought was fun.
Oh yeah, really fun. Very, very fun movie.
Yeah.
I also love the kid who's like, who are they singing for?
Yes, the kids questioning the weirdness of the witches was epic.
Mm-hmm.
But it was weird. They questioned it, but at the same time, they were kind of like completely okay with it. and can I say, well, the girl who plays Bette as a young woman?
Those kids my God, had the mannerisms. All three of them had the mannerisms down.
We were just stunned. just stunned. Like the way that those kids must have studied those performances just blew my mind.
Yeah, they were phenomenal. And then the other one that I totally love, it was a small scene, but it was so important, was the little femboy who asked them for a selfie inside the Walgreens. And he's all.
Well, and they did more with people dressing as the Sanderson sisters in Salem on Halloween.
Yeah.
And the arrival of the drag queens as the sisters, I laughed so hard I almost spit my tea out.
Oh yeah, totally. One of the things that we noticed was that this is the Hocus Pocus 2 is set in a world in which Hocus Pocus exists as a movie. Because like everybody in town knows how to dress as them, obviously, and nobody in town believes that they are going to come back.
Right.
They show a couple. So like clearly the movie exists in this world, which was an extra little weirdness that I really loved. It was like kind of meta, kind of just like complicated the world folding in on itself. I'm into that stuff.
Yeah. Oh, it was hilariously done. All right.
I think well, before
moments?
we get to the review, I think the most interesting thing that I kind of liked about it was that, in a way, I mean, it's fluff. This is candy floss.
Oh.
This is cotton candy for the people on this side of the pond. But it's the kind of fluff that if we were kids, this is what we would have wanted.
Oh my God. My childhood would have been different if I had seen this movie when I was 10.
Right.
Yeah, in a big way.
Kudos to Disney for doing it for this generation, you know. So, just want to say that.
Yeah.
Also, I'm not going to say anything to like give away spoilers about the plot or anything, but a movie that, if I'm correctly reading gender into the names and the credits, was written by a woman, directed by a woman, and produced by a woman. And it ultimately is a movie about the power of women befriending and caring about other women, as opposed to every other movie out there that's about women who just cannot work together.
Right. 100%. And it even delves into the misogyny and self-empowerment that those girls had back in Salem.
Yeah. And takes so many concepts from the original and updates them or improves them in really powerful ways. Like things like, you know, the bully having a revelation, you know, and I like stuff like that. Also the fact that this isn't just like a nostalgic retread of the original.
Right.
It's its own story. It gets to be its own thing. It's not about like wink, wink, nudge, nudge, here are all the actors through the original. It's just like, here's a story that's set in this world. Let's revisit these characters and let everybody else be new and original. Also, it's kind of a cast reunion for Veep, which was very strange. And we kind of kept expecting Julia Louis-Dreyfus to just emerge and cuss somebody. And
she was one of the drag queens.
That would be amazing if she was tucked away as one of the drag queens.
You know,
but we were talking about it afterwards, and I was like, I guess at some point, Kathy and Jimmy must have been like, okay, I'll do this, but we have to get my two favorite people from Veep.
True. I actually did not look through the full cast list to see if she was tucked away in there somewhere.
Well, she might be. Yeah, I didn't check either.
You know, the brilliant part about Halloween is she could have been there in costume and we would have just glanced right past her.
There are a ton of little visual Easter eggs in the movie, little nods to the original. Just countless.
There absolutely were. Even just the black cat in the store. My favorite.
Yeah. And like in the crowd, there are people who are dressed the way that the main character's parents are dressed in the original when they go to their Halloween party. Stuff like that. Also, I'm pretty sure that their friend who throws the party on Halloween is living in the house of the love interest from the original. We weren't totally sure of that, but we were like, oh, the interior of that house looks really familiar. So
I think you're right, actually.
Yeah.
Did you have a favorite
They
moment?
dusted off the set from the 90s.
What's an aspirational 90s house going to look like? Let's rebuild that, you know.
Well, some of the establishing shots looked like they were actually Salem, so they may have filmed some of it on location, including like some of the houses.
Might have.
Yeah.
Did you have a favorite moment?
I'll share mine while you think.
Yeah.
I like the fact that Doug Jones actually got several lines as Billy. So that was kind of nice that rather than be the sewed up throughout most of the first one, you actually got more of his side of the story as well. So they took a beloved character from the first, and actually gave him backstory and something to play with. So
I think my favorite moment might have been the magic show, like in the magic shop when I don't remember the actor's name, so I'm going to call him Richard Splatt because that's his name from Veep. But when he's doing the like giving the talk and kind of doing a magic show and the historical quote unquote version of the Sanderson sisters, that's just a really fun scene. And like the interaction with the little kid is really fun. And that was a moment that really summarizes.
Yeah, what's a virgin?
Yeah. We were okay, so they've addressed that the original storyline is like weird for a kid's movie. Like the magical hook is a little weird for a kid's movie. And at the same time, like it captured so much of what's magical, no pun intended, but like what's really delightful about the original of just like, it's fun to admire bad people as long as we don't actually have to interact with them. Like there's like joyfully transgressive stuff about the Sanderson sisters, and also there's stuff about them that's scary. And it's like that little scene captured everything for me. Loved it.
Nice. I think my favorite was they're out in the fair and the street fair, and they decide to enchant the audience to go find the mayor.
One way or another.
One way or another was the song. But I had so bought into the camp at that point. By the time that came on, I was just like, yes, I wanted this musical number right now. Was perfect. I don't know why that one moment just made me happy. And maybe it was the way the music was done too, but it all worked in that scene, and I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
And Kathy and Jimmy's character riding two flying Roombas was probably the closest second in the world. I've never seen anything so hilariously awesome.
When they wheel themselves into the garage, then I said to my husband, "Oh, they're doing such a good job of keeping track of what's in their story inventory.
Right?
I was like, they know what they've seeded this story with, and they're using it all." I was just like, that is writer admiration right there.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And from adult standpoint, the fact that she called them her girls was just the best.
Absolutely.
The best. All right. Should we move on to ratings, or is there more you want to point out?
I'm good.
Baz, why don't you start us this time?
I'm going to say they're 4s across the board, with my final adding an emotional quotient to it of pure sentimentality and pure joy that the kids of this age have a queer Disney film that queer children will be able to enjoy and see themselves. I'm going to move the final summation to a 5.
All right, Michael.
So for production quality, I'm going to give it a 5. This is a lush production. It is gorgeously filmed, beautiful sets, unbelievable costumes, great lighting. Like everything about this, you can tell there's Disney money behind it. Mm-hmm. There's a moment in the very beginning where there's sitting in the hallway of the high school, and I was just like looking at the wood paneling behind her, thinking like that looks like real wood paneling. Yeah. It might be. I don't know. Disney's not got that kind of money, so very impressed. Script, screenplay, 5. I was really impressed with how much more complex the story was than it necessarily needed to be, and how much more original it was than it needed to be. They could have put this out and a whole bunch of people would have watched it and been happy, and delighted, but they actually went in and tried to tell a serious story that's about something underneath everything else. So really, really pleased. Also, yeah, they did go out of their way to make sure that there was queer content in this movie in a way that kind of surprised me that Disney said yes to. I don't know. I feel like it's very likely that somebody slipped a bunch of queer content in because they knew that once Disney had told people there would be Hocus Pocus 2, they couldn't back out.
Right.
Sound, lighting, score, beautifully done. I'm going to give that a 5. Who am I kidding? Art direction and costuming. The way that they did the costuming, the costuming for the Sanderson sisters, but B, the costuming for the characters who were the new characters, the new teenagers, was actually very creative and very important to those characters, and like gave each of them a really distinct look, in a way that like a lot of things, like when we talked about You're Killing Me, and I was just like, people wore clothes. That was not this movie,
Right.
Casting, can I give that like an 8 or 9? Because they gave us characters who, like, this story, again, much like with Interview with the Vampire, this is a story that is not uniformly white. And so, like, people on Twitter who complain because they think that this is going to make their children worship Satan or something, I don't think it's the Satanism that they object to. I think it's women having agency and people not being white. So, directing, yeah, sure. Give it a 5. Like, at no point do I look at something at a performance and think, oh, that's a really complex performance. But like, does it need to be? So, okay, at least no director got in the way. And queer themes presented. I guess I'm going to give that a 4. I'm going to say a 4 because like this isn't about queer stuff, and it's kind of hard for me to see, other than any story about magic is sort of inherently queer because it's about having a secret power. And okay, oh, maybe I'm talking myself into a higher score. 4.5. So okay. And then personal overall rating, like, I don't know, 37. I was like really happy. I was just like really happy at the end of it. I just was grinning like an idiot for the last 45 minutes of the movie. I could not get over how much better of a movie this was than it needed to be for me to watch it. So
yeah, this will be an annual tradition.
Oh yeah, immediate.
So mine, like yours, are almost all 5s with 2 exceptions. Script, screenplay, I did only give a 4, and only because while there was a lot that was good in terms of growth and agency, it was still a formulaic plot. I mean, I had predicted the ending by about 20 minutes in, which for me is a problem, because if that proves to be true by the end of a film, I feel like somehow the writers weren't smarter than me, and I always want smart writers. So, and that's not what this movie was about. This movie wasn't about being clever. I get all of that, but I still was kind of like, I wanted them to do something for me that I hadn't expected. And the only thing I got there was the Roombas, so that wasn't writing. The other thing, like you, the queer themes presented, I only gave it a 2 because it was campy and there were certainly nods, but this movie is much more about feminism and female agency,
which in a way is queer anyways.
Actually queer. So, but my personal overall 5, it is now part of the annual Hocus Pocus 1, Hocus Pocus 2 tradition. So
yeah,
right up there with Nightmare Before Christmas.
Yeah. To revisit a different movie for like 2 seconds.
Sure.
Ginger Snaps.
Yes.
So
you promised me on Twitter you were going to tell me this.
Yes. So after that review session, I went grocery shopping. I was standing in the grocery store and I was literally, like, I remember distinctly standing in front of the chicken and thinking, like, this movie has always felt like so queer to me. Like, it always has felt like it speaks to some part of my queer experience. And I'm not sure that I've ever tried to articulate what that is. And now I feel like I've sort of been challenged to think more about that. And it occurred to me what it is that I had never maybe consciously phrased to myself, but that made me feel like that was a very queer movie. For me, that movie is a depiction of the queer experience of coming of age and watching your ride or die besties turn out to be straight. And that world, they descend into a world that will never be available to you and that you don't want to be available to you in a lot of ways. And so, like, when she says, I would rather die than be what you are, and when her friend's monstrous transformation is into just like a sexually active straight teenager, then that for me is a very queer story. But it's not like framed as that, because in theory the movie isn't really about Bridget, except that it kind of is. So I don't know. That was the thing that I realized, though. It's a movie about watching your best friend turn out to be straight,
right? Which
is like, that's a weird, hard part of the queer experience that I don't think gets talked about a lot.
Right. There's a bit, actually, have you seen the second one?
No, I have not, actually. I've never watched the sequels.
The second one, you might want to, because Bridget, right after the first one, gets put into a mental health facility.
Ooh.
And some of that has gone into.
So kind of a Hellraiser 2 thing.
A little bit.
Oh, well, I got to check that
So,
out.
honey.
Let's fire up the Asylum movies,
Right. All right, folks. Thank you for joining us in this review of Hocus Pocus 2. Please have some fun with it because it is there to make you happy.
And before we sign off for the review part, go out and check out our merch. I am wearing our Pride sweatshirt hoodie, which is very soft. It's kind of lovely. And on the back, it says sidebar, which is has a kind of subtitle of because when you know, you know.
Mhm.
So that's what's on the shirt. So just, yeah, it's lovely. It's soft. And I think it's worth the money. So, and it helps us keep the lights on.
Very nice. All right, folks, give a big round of applause to Michael G. Williams for joining us this month. It's been amazing. He's for one more next week.
Yes, indeed.
And now, on to what's won our week.
Welcome back, gals, gays, and days. Now we're talking about our Who Won the Week and what are we on about? So, Vance, who are you on about?
I am 100% behind the phone companies and or phone producers who have suddenly given me the opportunity to report robotexts as spam. That bullshit pisses me off.
Oh, okay.
You used to have to...
Is it really going to work?
I don't know, but it feels like a step in the right direction. Because, and here's where I'm going with this. I follow the candidates that I like on Twitter. I will sign up for their newsletters. I will support them in that way. Do not send messages to my phone. Do not call me with political bullshit. Do not text me with political bullshit. So the fact that all of a sudden with this last update, my iPhone's like, hey, you're trying to delete this. Do you want to report it? Yes, I do, iPhone. I really do. So my hope is that the phone companies are gathering the data they need to go to Congress and say, okay, let's legislate this crap. Because I'm tired of it. Do not interrupt my phone with your crap. That's for personal communication. I'll go sign up for your stuff and look at it elsewhere. That's what I'm on about this week. Also, election time pisses me off in general, so I'm all riled up.
Yeah.
So what about you? What are you on about this week?
All right. So I was smart and I wrote them down this time. Not that anybody could read them, but yeah, I did write them down.
You're the only one who has to read that, Scratch.
No, not true. Family members do. Anyways, okay, so who won the week? Or no, what are we on about this week? So Rick Beato is a YouTuber I've just discovered, and basically he's a session musician. He's been around for quite a while. Evidently, he's well known in musical circles as a studio musician. Got quite the reputation, and he has a really great YouTube channel. And what he does is that because he's a guitarist and he's a multi-instrumentalist from what I can tell, because I've only watched a few of his videos, but what he does is he takes popular songs that everybody kind of remembers, so they're older songs, at least that I've seen so far, that he breaks down and explains to you why they worked.
Nice.
Yeah, from a musical standpoint, from a music construction standpoint. So children, listen up, stop your copying and pasting, come learn how to really do it. Anyways, he has this latest one. Well, maybe it's not so late. Maybe I just caught up to it. But it's from the song that was released by Sergio Mendes back in the late 80s, early 90s, called Never Gonna Let You Go. And it was sung by Jeffrey Osborne. And oh my God, I just blanked on the lady's name. I'll put it up here. Anyways, it's interesting because, and I'm a big Sergio Mendes fan. In fact, a lot of very popular songs like the Beatles, Norwegian Wood, and songs like that from that era, I learned as Sergio Mendes songs before I actually heard the originals by the original. And you have to understand, Sergio Mendes and Brazil 66 was out during the same period. So when they covered a song that was popular, it was popular at the time that they covered it, and they also made it a hit because it had a real Brazilian influence on it. So that's who Sergio Mendes is. Well, he ended up having this song recorded, and it appeared on one of his albums in the late 80s, early 90s. I think it was like 91 or 92. Anyways, the song is really interesting because, and I totally forgot about this, you know, even though I know the song really well, but I totally forgot about how unusual that song is. It has so many key changes and so many chord progressions that don't make any sense, but somehow work. So I highly suggest, if you want to kind of learn a little bit something interesting about chord progression and chord construction and why certain things work, this is the song that he has great stories to tell about it, first of all. And secondly, he actually walks around his guitar to explain to you why the song should not work, but it totally does. And it was really fascinating to watch. So I really, really liked that. I'm also on about something that I think I'm going to start doing on my personal channel, SA Baz Collins. It's that I've started going back and looking at queer musical artists, not necessarily from now, which actually there are quite a few that are just out and open. I mean, Lil Nas X, you know, Steve Grand, you've got a number of them that are out there now. But these are people back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s who were queer. And maybe it was revealed later in life. And so I've started looking back at some of those. And so, in fact, my husband was fast asleep. I record here in my bedroom. And my husband was fast asleep, and then I was like 4 o'clock in the morning, and I was listening to Dan Hartman's "Relight My Fire," which is absolutely one of my favorite disco songs from that era. The construction is just really amazing. String arrangements I love, and it has Lolita Holloway, who was one hell of a singer. She was up there with Martha Wash and the rest of them. But I was listening to it, and I'm thinking, you know, I really loved his stuff, and I have so much of it, and I always kind of suspected he was queer, but I didn't know for a fact. But he died in 1992 of HIV complications. And at the time, I think they said it was more like a brain thing or something. They didn't put it out directly. This came out much later after he had passed. But he was on a resurgence in the 90s when he passed away, and he had the song "I Can Dream About You," and you know, so he had songs that were out there that were starting to, and it wasn't like his career totally faded, but it was putting him out there again. And then I found out he had this whole history with the Edgar Winter Band back in the 70s, and so I mean, just phenomenal story about who he was. So I'm kind of thinking I'm going to do, for the children, queer musical artists that were influential and had a presence, but wasn't necessarily known at the time for one reason or another, you know. So I'm on about Dan Hartman. I think he's going to be my first that I'm going to do. Next, I have Dimash Kudaibergen, whom I totally love. He did a music video, I think, to end all music videos. It's really kind of an amazing piece. It's a mini movie. It's about 13 minutes long, but it deals with how fascism can separate humans more than the fascist thinks it will unite them. And it's a really powerful story, and it's done really well. And it's a story of 3 friends, childhood friends, 2 boys and a girl, and what happens after they make this pledge to always stay together. And he ends up finding on the ocean, as a boy, he ends up finding a little like symbol that he puts on a string, and there were 3 of them. So he gave one to each of his friends, and he had one. And then you see how one of the 3 decide to turn it into a fascist symbol, and starts to have wars and starts to be really aggressive and domineering, and how the other boy ends up becoming a part of the resistance in a fight, and then the girl of the group ends up giving birth to a baby. So at the end, you kind of get the idea that a new chance for rebirth is going to happen. But it's so well done. It's beautifully photographed. I mean, it is just a stunning piece of work. And I'm finally thinking that Dimash may get the full recognition worldwide that he absolutely deserves. So I'm on about that. So who won your week then?
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. On October 19th, she was doing a town hall meeting and haters decided to protest it, purely screaming things about her LGBTQ support. And she turned it around and showed them exactly how ridiculous they looked. My hero. I hope she wins this election. I'm not in her district. I can't vote for her, but I really want her to stay in that seat.
Yeah,
So
especially
badly.
given that her competition is another one of those
Oh, I know.
awful
That I'm
idiots.
fairly certain the competition was behind the organization of those protesters.
Yeah. Mine is a bit unusual in that Rian Johnson, writer, director extraordinaire. Well, my husband would argue that only because he did one of the last Star Wars movies and my husband thought it was shit. But anyways, he did Knives Out, which is phenomenal, highly recommended. And Ryan just said that he announced that Benoit Blanc, played by Daniel Craig, is a gay character. So guess what we're going to do in December? We're going to figure out how to do a review of Glass Onion, which is the new Knives Out that's coming out, because it actually has a scene where Benoit and his lover, partner, husband, whoever, boyfriend, makes an appearance. So and they're keeping that under wraps of who it is that's playing that person. So, and he said in this interview I read that there's a clue in the first movie that Benoit Blanc is gay, and I need to go watch Knives Out. And the only thing I can think of off the top of my head is that he sings show tunes.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the only thing I can think of, because otherwise Benoit seemed to be very focused on.
Yeah.
So. Anyways, that's who won my week. Daniel Craig, who also is a big ally and has played gay before, and I will put the picture of the movie up here that he was in early in his career where he played a queer character. So I think it's called Love is the Devil.
That sounds
so
great.
That's who won my week.
Nice. Any final words of wisdom? I love
Yeah.
asking people that, by the way.
Yeah. No.
All right, folks, Written on the Edge is produced by Rogue Ravens Media. For our disclaimers, links to social media, our listen stations, or to sign up as a guest, visit www.rotepodcast.com. If you would like to catch up with some of your favorite artists, like Mr. Hudson, like Mr. Williams, or anybody else who's come back to our show and shared their goings-on, like, subscribe, sign up, please support our YouTube channel.
Buy our merch.
Support our merch store. Baz is rolling out new designs all the time. And tune in
Our
next
Pride
week.
hoodie.
Yes, and tune in next week for our Queer Media Fix.
Oh, what's that? Closing time. The bums rush in melody, dear.